You've probably seen Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. But did you know it marks the beginning of the final day of Jesus Christ, the most famous man in history? From that moment on, the course of humanity changed forever. Jesus' last hours were filled with conflict, betrayal, and mystery. What really happened that day? How did people react to his crucifixion? And Judas, how did he feel after betraying him? We're going to answer these questions and explore the events that changed the world. This is the channel Facts Between Worlds, and we're glad to have you here. Subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this, and help our work by giving a like. It really supports the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do it now. At that time, Jerusalem was the main religious and political center for the Jews within the province of Judea, which was under the control of the powerful Roman Empire. Interestingly, the city had a certain degree of religious autonomy. The Jews were allowed to maintain their rituals, celebrations, and internal laws, as long as they did not challenge Roman authority. This made Jerusalem a unique place, with a freedom of thought that led to the emergence of various groups within Judaism itself, each with its own interpretations and practices. Some Jews were expecting a Messiah as a military leader, who would free the people from Roman rule. Others believed in a simple man, the son of a carpenter, who would bring inner transformation to each person. This man was Jesus Christ. He was already known for preaching and performing miracles in Jerusalem, but not everyone accepted him. Many saw Jesus as a prophet or Messiah, while religious leaders viewed him as a threat to the established order. Even aware of the risks, Jesus returned to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover with his disciples, marking the final stage of his journey. At night, around 6 p.m., Jesus gathered with his 12 disciples in the upper room where the Last Supper took place. They ate unleavened bread and drank wine, recalling the history of the Jewish people. At the Last Supper, Jesus began performing gestures that would later become the foundation of the Eucharist, one of the most profound moments of his mission. He washed the feet of each disciple, an act symbolizing humility and service, showing that even the one who was Master and Lord placed himself in service of others. It was a lesson in practical love, speaking more than any words could about the true meaning of leadership and compassion. After this remarkable gesture, Jesus broke the bread, looking into the eyes of each disciple and said, "This is my body," offering himself completely. Then he shared the wine, saying, "This is my blood." Every word and every gesture carried a deep message. He wanted them to understand that his life and mission were not just theoretical teachings, but something that needed to touch each heart in a personal and intimate way. Despite the atmosphere of celebration and closeness, a silent sorrow hung over Jesus. He knew that this would be the last night he would be free before facing the suffering that awaited him. The anguish of knowing what was coming was present in his gaze, even as he tried to convey it with serenity and love to the disciples. Then, in a serious tone, Jesus announced that one of them would betray him. A heavy silence fell over the table. Surprised and confused, the disciples looked at one another, and one by one, with disbelief and anxiety, they asked, "Is it I, Lord?" The Master did not reveal any name at that moment, leaving a tense and reflective atmosphere, showing that betrayal often comes from where it is least expected, and that every personal choice carries profound consequences. Jesus already knew that Judas Iscariot had planned to betray him, arranging to hand him over for 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave at the time. Even in the face of this betrayal, Jesus did not respond with anger. He didn't expose Judas or push him away from the group. On the contrary, he allowed him to stay at the table, sharing the bread and wine, accepting it as part of his mission. According to the Gospel of John, Jesus discreetly signaled the traitor, giving him a piece of bread and saying, "What you are about to do it quickly." After receiving the bread, Judas left. It was night, around 10 or 11 o'clock. Jesus and the disciples then left the upper room and made their way through the valley of Cedron to the Garden of Gethsemane, outside the walls of Jerusalem. In the Garden of Gethsemane, a place of silence and isolation, Jesus withdrew to pray. He was deeply distressed to the point of sweating blood, a rare phenomenon called hematidrosis, caused by extreme stress. This shows that Jesus felt suffering intensely, just like any person. In the Gospels, he prays, "Father, if possible, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." The cup symbolizes suffering or an unavoidable destiny. Jesus did not desire the pain, but he accepted God's will, demonstrating courage and faithfulness to his mission. While he prayed, his disciples, despite being asked to keep watch, ended up falling asleep. At a moment of vulnerability, Judas arrived accompanied by guards, using a kiss as a signal to identify Jesus, a greeting that became a symbol of betrayal. Jesus was immediately arrested. Peter reacted violently, cutting off the ear of one of the guards, but Jesus intervened, rebuking the aggression and healing the wounded man, showing surrender and purpose, not defeat. Jesus was taken for a preliminary interrogation at the house of Annas, the former high priest. He was questioned about his teachings and disciples, but responded calmly, reminding them that he had always taught publicly, and that witnesses could confirm his words. One guard, irritated, slapped him, but Jesus did not react and asked with dignity, "If I spoke wrongly, show it. But if I spoke the truth, why are you striking me?" Unable to obtain a confession, Annas sent Jesus to the official trial before Caiaphas, the acting high priest. The trial of Jesus was marked by a blatant violation of the Jewish laws of the time. It took place in the early hours of the morning, in a rushed setting, and without the presence of legitimate witnesses, revealing more of a political maneuver than a true pursuit of justice. The religious leaders sought a quick condemnation, and the main charge brought against him was blasphemy, as Jesus had claimed to be the Messiah, the Son of God. To them, this accusation represented a threat to religious authority and the balance of power within Jewish society. Before Caiaphas, the high priest, Jesus made a short yet profound statement, "I am." This was the only explicit declaration recorded in the Gospels in which he directly affirms his divinity. However, the full understanding of this statement would only be formally recognized many centuries later, during the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when the Catholic Church officially defined the divine nature of Christ. Meanwhile, outside the trial chamber, Peter discreetly followed the unfolding events. He wanted to stay close to his master, but with caution, avoiding exposure. Yet, he was recognized by several people who knew him as a disciple of Jesus. Out of fear and insecurity, he denied any association with him 3 times, fulfilling exactly the prophecy Jesus had made. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." After the third denial, guilt and sorrow overwhelmed Peter. He withdrew, devastated, and wept bitterly, deeply feeling the weight of his failure. At the same time, Judas Iscariot, overwhelmed by intense remorse, tried to undo his betrayal. He attempted to return the 30 pieces of silver he had received for the acts that led to Jesus' arrest, but the priests, in their coldness and thirst for power, rejected the gesture. This moment symbolizes human complexity, showing that even in repentance, acceptance, or forgiveness is not always immediate, highlighting the drama of choices, consequences, and redemption that permeated those days. Judas, overcome with remorse, threw the coins into the temple and hanged himself. But there was still one final obstacle. The death sentence required Roman approval. At dawn, Jesus was taken to Pontius Pilate, governor of Judea, at the imposing Herod's palace. The Jewish leaders had to adjust their accusation, since blasphemy was not a Roman crime. So they presented a political charge. Jesus claimed to be the King of the Jews, which could be seen as a threat to Emperor Tiberius. However, Pilate found no concrete guilt in Jesus. The religious leaders' accusation was weak under Roman law. For Pilate, Jesus proclaiming himself the King of the Jews seemed like an internal conflict, not a threat to Rome. He saw Jesus as a calm man, showing no signs of violence. Upon learning that Jesus was from Galilee, Pilate sent him to Herod Antipas, who was in Jerusalem for Passover. Herod, curious and expecting miracles, found Jesus completely silent. Seeing no guilt, Herod mocked Jesus, dressing him in a bright robe as a form of ridicule, and sent him back to Pilate. The Roman soldiers also ridiculed Jesus, placing a crown of thorns on him. The persecution came mainly from the Jewish religious leaders. For Herod, it was a spectacle. For Pilate, it was about maintaining order without getting involved in religious disputes. Pilate found himself in a dilemma. He saw no guilt in Jesus, but he couldn't ignore the pressure from the religious leaders and the crowd, who were restless outside the palace. Meanwhile, the apostles had scattered, overcome by fear, and Jesus stood alone, surrounded by pursuers, determined to condemn him. In an attempt to save an innocent man, Pilate turned to the Passover tradition, freeing a prisoner chosen by the people. He presented Jesus of Nazareth or Barabbas, a violent criminal. The crowd, influenced by the religious leaders, chose Barabbas. Jesus' trial lasted only a few minutes, and Pilate could not prevent a condemnation he knew was unjust. At this moment, the expression, "washing one's hands," emerged. Pilate, under pressure, symbolically washed his hands, declaring that he would not take responsibility for Jesus' condemnation. Within hours, the people's faith turned into rejection, and cries demanding crucifixion echoed through the streets. Jesus was brought again before Pilate and the Jewish leaders. The Roman Empire used crucifixion not only to execute, but to terrorize the population. Jesus carried part of his own cross to Golgotha, the place of the skull, along the route known as the Via Dolorosa, a symbol of redemptive suffering. Along the way, crowds pressed in. Seeing women weeping, Jesus said, "Do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and your children." Finally, he reached Golgotha and was nailed to the cross. The Romans nailed the condemned by their wrists and feet, leaving them hanging for hours in intense pain and mocked by the crowd. Their clothes were cast lots by the soldiers. Above Jesus' head, they placed the sign, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." To the Romans and the leaders, it was mockery. To the faithful, it was the truth. Even while suffering, Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Beside him, two criminals were also crucified. One mocked him, while the other acknowledged his guilt and Jesus' innocence. This man, Dismas, said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Dismas was the only man to receive this promise directly from Christ. Demas, the repentant criminal crucified beside Jesus, symbolizes forgiveness. He is known as the first good thief, receiving Jesus' promise of entering paradise. Shortly after, Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" A line from Psalm 22, showing his suffering and fulfilling the prophecy of an innocent, righteous man. The crucifixion was part of a divine plan. Around noon, the sky darkened for 3 hours. Before dying, Jesus said, "It is finished." At that moment, the temple veil tore, symbolizing that there would no longer be a barrier between God and humanity. A Roman soldier, Longinus, pierced Jesus' side with a spear. From the blood and water that flowed, he regained partial sight, converted, and became known as Saint Longinus. After Jesus' death, the earth shook and rocks split apart. A Roman soldier declared, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." It was through the cross, a symbol of pain and humiliation, that Jesus fulfilled his mission, offering his own life for the salvation of all. According to the Bible, he would rise 3 days later, spending 40 days with his disciples, teaching about the kingdom of God and preparing them for their future mission. His followers, once full of fear, became witnesses. Jesus' message, initially spread by ordinary people, would cross empires, withstand persecution, and reach all the way to our time. Thank you for watching. Leave a like, subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this, and support our work by giving a thumbs up. It really strengthens the channel. Bye, and see you next time.